Hi, welcome to Richard Bey Talk once again. Okay, this week I partook in the Barbenheimer experience that is, washing over the entire country. At least I partook in half of it. I saw the movie Oppenheimer, and I'm astonished that that movie is doing so well. It's almost matching Barbie with box office grosses. It's because it's a difficult movie. You really have to concentrate. You really have to think while you're watching it. It's a movie that spans 3 decades, and it's not in chronological order. It goes back and forth from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, and the 50s is in black and white, and it's got, different characters in it. And so it takes a deal of concentration, focus, remembering so many characters too, and so many great actors playing different parts that can distract you when you go, oh, look, there's Kenneth Branagh, and he's playing Neil Bohr's, the physicist. Oh, Tom Conti plays Albert Einstein in a makeup. Tom Conti's a great British actor, but he's completely unrecognizable. And Cillian Murphy, of course, we know from zombie movies and Peaky Blinders. And, I think it's a good movie, but I came across a review that had this quote about what the theme of the movie is about. And it said, when morality gets in the way of power, power will obliterate the careers and livelihoods of those with morals who slow down or get in the way of power. And I think that is the theme of the movie, and it's a theme that is important for us today. And deciding when people should speak out for what is right, and when morals compel them to speak. Oppenheimer, in the movie, he loses his security clearance in 1954, I believe it is. There's a decision because he's had a girlfriend who was a communist, and his wife had been a communist at one time, and he knew communists in the 1930s, a very different time. So sort of like the McCarthy hearings, they go after Oppenheimer, but they're also upset with him because he wants to stop the H-bomb, which is a bomb that's about 1,000 times more powerful than the atom bomb. And he doesn't see, the purpose in that kind of weapon. And he proposes disarmament and mutual talks with the Soviet Union to move forward on disarmament. And of course, the right wing doesn't like that at all. Albert, you saw the movie too. What you kind of agree with me, don't you, that it's a difficult movie to follow, right?
Certainly too long. And by the way, Christopher Nolan's contention that it must be seen in 70 millimeter IMAX, definitely not. You can watch it on a regular big screen and it's fine. And also the black and white scenes are not to delineate time. They're to delineate subjective versus objective points of view, which again is very confusing. There's no need for that, really, I think. So,
but the black and white scenes are in 1954, aren't they?
No, not all of them. No.
Yeah.
They delineate point of view.
Well, that's something that I missed because
it's a difficult movie, although it is said to be
oh yeah, when he meets Einstein, that's in color, and that's 19. Well, is that 1954? Or no, that's the late 40s. No, that's a different time. Anyway, I'm amazed that it's doing so well because, the great unwashed who buy movie tickets, they love their Fast and Furious and the action, and they love the Mission Impossible. And I can see how they would love Barbie, but this is a movie that requires the audience to do something while they watch the movie, right?
Yes.
So you must be surprised by that as well, that it's doing so well. No?
No, I think there's a large enough contingent of Americans that want to see something that
challenging
their intellect
Oh, well, then you have a lot more positive opinion of the public, which now overwhelmingly wants Donald Trump back in the White House. But we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so even though Oppenheimer lost his security clearance and he lost any job opportunities that he might have had with the government as a physicist or on the Atomic Energy Commission, decades later, in 2022, the government gave him back his security clearance and said the hearing that stripped him of it was improper and didn't follow proper procedure. Oh, Oppenheimer. Oh, we showed some mercy and retribution for Oppenheimer. In 2022, he'd been dead for what, 20 years? Anyway, I'm going to talk today a bit about mercy and pardons. And there's a lot of that in the news these days. Now, Shakespeare in The Merchant of Venice. Can we see that there? In The Merchant of Venice, Portia is arguing, trying to get them to show a mercy in a case where somebody was going to lose a pound of their flesh from somewhere in their body, probably around the heart. And Portia pleads with the court, saying these words: "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes." Now, we generally believe that when somebody is pardoned, we're showing them some degree of compassion, some mercy. In the Trump White House, mercy and pardons were not a gentle rain. They were more like a hurricane, a torrent, a deluge. In fact, Jared Kushner, when he testified before the January 6th committee, said, "Oh, I didn't have time to get involved in all that stuff because I was so busy working on the pardons." And two of them were for Jared Kushner's acquaintances. More than that, he got his father pardoned, and he got one of his best friends pardoned, put on the list. And I mean, the number of people who were pardoned for so many different things. Michael Flynn, who had been working for the benefit of a foreign government. Does that ring a bell? Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, working for a Russian front group in the Ukraine, con men like and crooks like Steve Bannon and Roger Stone, who I'll get into in a minute. I mean, it was almost comical. It was like a cartoon. Take a look at this.
Pardon me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Excuse me. I beg your pardon. Pardon me. Pardon me. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Pardon me. I beg your pardon. Pardon me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Excuse me. I beg your pardon. Excuse me. Pardon me. Excuse me. Pardon me.
Yeah, that's what the Trump White House must have sounded like in those last months. We're even told that some pardons were up for sale, that Giuliani was trying to get money in exchange for getting pardons from the White House. But now there is, in some respects, among the Republican primary field, a push to promise a pardon for Trump if he is convicted. He hasn't been convicted of anything yet, but they're already, in fact, one of the candidates, Ramaswamy, said that every Republican candidate should, as a necessity to be considered for the nomination, should swear that they would pardon Donald Trump. Take a look at this.
I believe I will move us forward. And yes, I think one of the right ways to do that is to pardon the former president of the United States from what is clearly a politicized prosecution.
You've said in the past, though, you would be inclined to pardon Donald Trump. That assumes he'll be convicted. That assumes he had something to hide here. Has your position changed? Would you still pardon him?
Well,
What I've said is if he is found guilty, that is certainly showing that it was dangerous to our national security. But I'll take you back to Nixon and Ford. I mean, I think that one of the things we have to look at is not what's in the best interest of, the president, but what's in the best interest of the country.
What's in the best interest of the country? And she took us back to Nixon Ford. Ford, of course, pardoned Richard Nixon after he became president. And many people, and I think Ford himself, believed that was one of the reasons he lost the election to Jimmy Carter, because he pardoned Richard Nixon, and people disapproved of that. But Gerald Ford said that for the rest of his life, he kept a Supreme Court decision in his wallet. The Supreme Court decision is called Burdick versus the United States. And in that decision, the Supreme Court noted that those who accept a pardon are confessing their guilt. So that's how Gerald Ford rationalized this. So, if Trump accepts a pardon from one of these candidates, at least according to Burdick versus the United States, he is confessing his guilt in the crime. Now, another pardon that is in the news is one for Hunter Biden, who's been so much in the news cycle, at least in the last few weeks. And the press secretary, Jean-Pierre, was asked if Joe Biden, as president, would pardon his own son. Listen to this.
Yesterday, and that's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well,
I just said no. I just answered. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So, but listen, with all of the Trump cronies who were pardoned in the last months of his presidency from the Oval Office, Jared Kushner's father and Jared Kushner's friend who were pardoned, it's been evident how concerned Joe Biden is about his son, who, listen, I got to tell you, I don't care really one way or the other what happens to Hunter Biden. If he actually broke the law, he should pay whatever penalty is appropriate. Not any more for being a Biden, not any less for being a Biden. But, one of these charges that everybody's complaining about, and the whistleblowers who have come forward and spoken to the House committee, the Oversight Committee, say that he's being treated too lightly, and that the handbook states certain prerequisites for whether you should charge someone with a misdemeanor or a felony when it comes to tax evasion. Title 26, Section 7201, evasion of payment for taxes. These are the elements of the offense that are necessary. An attempt to evade or defeat the payment of tax. All right. Hunter Biden did do that, ridiculously so, by taking deductions for hookers and his hotel room at the Chateau Marmont where he met with the hookers. The second prerequisite is an additional tax due, and you owe the government money. So, yes, that's certainly part of it. And the third part is willfulness, that you actually had the intent of defrauding the government of the tax that you owe. Well, that's a little shaky, because we know that he was completely fucked up on drugs during this period of time. So whether he was in his right mind or not, maybe that's not an excuse. But let me tell you something. Roger Stone was charged with tax evasion. And yes, it's even more clear that he set up a process to evade the payment of taxes, that he owed more taxes. He eventually paid $2 million. And willfulness? Well, I don't think he has any drug excuse for his willful behavior. And he was not charged with a felony. Here's Roger Stone talking about.
But at 6 o'clock today, the Department of Justice announced that they were suing me for $2.5 million of unpaid taxes, which is preposterous because they know that their epic 2-year attempt to destroy me cost me everything I had. I have no cash, no stocks, no bonds, no real estate. I don't own a home. I don't have a car. I'm barely getting by, and they know this. It's persecution. So now they have hooked up a preposterous lawsuit against me for back taxes when they know they have destroyed me financially. Will I plead? No. I'll fight. So please go to stonedefensefund.com. That's stonedefensefund.com, because I'm gearing up to get back in the fight to clear my name.
Yeah, well, yeah, you didn't really, because he says he would not plead, but he did plead guilty eventually and had to pay $2 million. And I guess, that poor little schlub, sitting in their cabin in the Ozarks, who sent him money because they saw this on Fox News, maybe they paid Roger Stone's taxes for him. But you talk about the fact that people should be treated equally. Even at the time, there were people who said, why wasn't he criminally charged? Well, now they're saying, why wasn't Hunter Biden criminally charged? They both satisfy what the handbook calls for in terms of delineating a misdemeanor charge of tax evasion with a felony charge. But yes, we do have a 2-tier system here. And I wonder where these 2 whistleblowers were when Roger Stone pleaded guilty and had no criminal charge. What were they doing during that time when Trump was president? Why didn't they come forward? I don't get it. But like I said, Hunter Biden was a mess. And if he broke laws, well, then he should be treated like other people and not better than other people. He shouldn't be treated worse than Roger Stone, because Hunter Biden also paid his taxes. All right. Now, I once had a tax audit. I've only had one in my entire life. And it happened when I was on WABC and I was criticizing the Bush administration and Dick Cheney and the phony WMD evidence and this whole idea of going to war in Iraq. And then I get a tax audit, and I went to my accountant, who was this was a top firm in New York, because at the time I had the money to pay them, and I paid plenty for them to be my accountants. And he said, listen, there's nothing here. Everything you have here is substantiated, and there's nothing wrong with your taxes. Still, I had to go back and look at the diary and gather up all my receipts for different things. And I was like, when I went to the IRS office, I was sitting there shitting a brick going, oh my God, what's going to happen? And the auditor comes out, and it's a kid who's about 24 years old. And he goes, Richard Bey, I saw your name on the list, but I said, no, that couldn't be the same Richard Bey. I love your show. Oh, you're so terrific. I watch it all the time. And silently I said, thank you, God. And I went inside. And as I walked in, there was another auditor in the booth next to us who was an Orthodox Jew with a yarmulke and a long beard. And when he saw me, he went, boy, Richard Bey, the liberal. You're on WABC radio. And I said, yeah, that's right. So I sat down with my auditor, who liked me and liked my TV show. And every time we came to something, I deducted music lessons. So I said, yeah, but I need singing lessons because I sing on the show over and over again. And I said, tell him, doesn't he? He goes, and we went to the guy in the next booth. He goes, yeah, he sings on the show. And then he said, I had movies deducted. I said, I do Dick and Dad go to the movies. That's a business expense. I have to review the movies with my father. Don't I do that? Yes, he reviews the movies with his father. And I walked out, and I didn't know anything. But I tell you, it's pretty disconcerting when you get that slip in the mail. So anyway, the Trump campaign is moving in full force. In fact, there are some poll numbers that came out today that show he's just swamping the entire field. But he's also been on the campaign trail with rallies where he said the Democrats are playing dirty, so we have to play dirty. Right? Like he never plays dirty, right? Well, here are some examples of how his campaign is out there rallying the voters. Listen to this.
That's not at the top of his game, never was at the top of a game, never was. We have a guy who's a dumb son of a bitch, and to allow this to happen to our country. Every dollar spent attacking me by Republicans is a dollar given straight to the Biden campaign if he makes it.
If you fuck around with us, if you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
Yeah. You call your opponent a dumb son of a bitch. If you fuck around with us, we're going to do things to you. Oh, boy, will we do things to you. We've gone from the eloquence of FDR to the speeches of JFK and Ronald Reagan, which were inspiring, to Obama, who had an incredible gift for oratory, to my opponent is a dumb son of a bitch and don't fuck with us. That's where America is now. Well, here's where America is now, because two new polls just came out. New York Times, Siena College poll. This is the presidential primary. And this was all Republican registered voters for the primary. Donald Trump, 54%. Ron DeSantis, 17%. Everybody else dribbling along in single digits. Wow. That's what you're facing, folks. That's what Republicans want. They want the guy, don't fuck with me. And here's another poll, because people say, well, what happens in the end? You know, some of these candidates are going to drop out. It may end up being a primary just between Trump and Ron DeSantis. And then the numbers have to be different. Well, these are the numbers if there's a head-to-head matchup between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. 62% to 31%. Oh my God, that's double. Now, the Ron DeSantis campaign, they ought to have a new commercial that says, I've fallen and I can't get up, because he keeps sinking and sinking in the polls. And the problem is, people say, oh, well, 2028, that'll be his time. No, it's never going to be his time, because the problem is Ron DeSantis. The problem is who he is. This mean-spirited, whiny, unsociable character who has no gift for campaigning at all, regardless of all the idiotic policies that he's tried to make in Florida. No, the country doesn't want to be Florida. So anyway, one of the questions that I'm most often asked is, how do you get into TV? And I always say, get a girlfriend who has an audition and go in with her, because that's how I got into TV. I had a wonderful girlfriend who was an actress named Forbesy Russell. And she had done movies of the week. She did commercials. One day we were sitting in Hollywood, which is where I met her. And I said, what's the most money you ever made in a year? And she said, $50,000 I made one year from commercials and a movie of the week. And I went, $50,000. It seemed like the fortune of a Raja to me. Well, anyway, we were both leaving California, and she said, I have an audition with CBS for a show called Two on the Town, where there's a couple, and they go out and they do all the fantasy things people would like to do in New York, but probably couldn't afford or didn't have access. She said, come in and audition with me. I said, who's going to hire me? I said, I'm not a journalist. I'm an actor. I have one suit to my name. I probably have 2 ties. And she said, come on, it'll be fun. You'll help me relax. So I came in and I auditioned with her. And then they took me to Central Park and they asked me to tell them a New York story. So this is the story I told them. I said, they had the camera on me and this was my audition. And I said, I was eating in this restaurant on Columbus Avenue, an outdoor cafe at an outdoor table. And there was a young lady sitting across from me and she had her purse on the table. Somebody ran up Columbus Avenue, grabbed her purse, and started taking off down the street. And I said, what happened? She said, he stole my purse. I jumped over the guardrail and started going after this guy. So he turned down one of the side streets, probably in the high 70s, and I'm running after him, and I can see he's getting winded, and I'm ready to catch up, and I'm going, oh, my God. What am I going to say? What am I going to do what if he has a gun? What if he has a knife? But I got up to him and I said, I'd always thought about doing this. I said, NYPD up against the wall. And the guy went up against the wall. I said, spread him. And he dropped the purse and I started to frisk him and I'm going, oh my God, what do I do now? What are Miranda rights? I put my fingers through his belt loop and I started walking him back to Columbus. And he said, I feel sick. I feel sick. And he put his fingers in his throat like he was going to gag or throw up. And I said, all right, I'm going to let you go this time. But if you're ever caught in this precinct again, you're going to be in big trouble. And I returned the purse to the woman who was sitting next to me. And she said, oh, thank you, officer. I said, I'm not an officer. I'm an actor. But I got the purse back and I got the job at CBS for telling that story. Now, years later, I asked the program director, how could you have hired me? I have no background in television. I didn't know anything about it. And she said, there were 2 things. You told a good story. And when you told the story, I wanted to hear how it ended up. And the second thing is, when you came into my office for an interview, all the secretaries came in and said, who was that guy? Yeah, I was a pretty good-looking guy when I was young, I guess, although I didn't know it at the time. So I got this show, Two on the Town. And you know how much I love New York. I'm even drinking my New York mug coffee this morning. So I got to do so many things. I interviewed Bob Guccione in the penthouse mansion, which was incredible. And I got to sing with Gary U.S. Bonds, who was making a comeback. He had #1 hits with New Orleans and Quarter to Three. And he was performing at that time with Bruce Springsteen, who was helping him make this comeback. I interviewed Alvin Ailey, one of the great figures in dance of the 20th century. And I talked to so many ordinary New Yorkers, too, about problems like finding a parking space. Oh, it was just wonderful. And when my agent called me and told me I had the job, he said, what should we ask for? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I handle actors. I've never handled somebody who was, in those days, we didn't have reality television. I've never handled a host of a show. He says, how much money should we ask for? And I thought back to Forbesy and that day in Hollywood. And I said, tell them $50,000. That's what I want. And about 10 minutes later, he called me back and said, you got it. That show was called Two on the Town. And even though Forbesy didn't get it, we remain good friends, and she's a very dear friend to me. But here's what the show was like.
If money, sex, and power are evils, then this is the story of an evil man. If, however, they are rewards, then he's one of the most successful men in America. He lives in a $20 million Manhattan townhouse with an indoor swimming pool. He's constantly surrounded by beautiful women, and reportedly he earns about $500,000 a week. One man is able to live out this fantasy because of a magazine that explores the fantasies of millions of men. The man is Bob Guccione. The magazine is Penthouse. When you're photographing a woman in a session, how do your mutual sexualities come into play?
Traditionally, biologically, the male is a voyeur and the female is an exhibitionist. Now, this is the way nature intended the sexes to get together, the male to see, the woman to exhibit.
This is the Ritz, New York's premier palace of rock and roll. It's quiet now, but in a little while, these walls will be vibrating with the hard-driving bass of rock. One of the biggest stars in the business is here tonight. In 1961, he had the #1 song in America. And now, 20 years later, he's back on top again.
That's what I call New York feeling, y'all. Yeah, let's rock and roll. Come on.
Oh, this little girl is mine. Was that high enough? Until my love comes a-tumbling down, I'm gonna wait till the midnight hour.
Sounds good to me. I don't know if it was wishful thinking or just something in the back saying, just keep hanging in there. It'll come.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gary U.S. Bonds.
It's the only thing I know, it's the only thing I really knew. So I had to depend on it to come back. And
But how did you know that you would be coming back with it?
Because I hang in. I keep telling you, I'm a hanger-inner.
I need your love. Please don't make me wait. Tell me it's not too late.
See, Mom, it paid off all those years.
No, it didn't.
You still owe.
Everybody's happy with rock and roll. If they're happy, I'm happy.
Well, let's leave it at fun. I guess Double Dutch can take your breath away. Believe me, I know. It took mine.
Okay. That's it. That's it.
Ah.
Try it again.
Too high?
Too high.
Move back? Okay. Okay. Oh. Let's try it one more time. Oh. What? Okay, one time. I'm getting it now. Like this? I can do it. I know I can do it.
1, 2, 3, jump. That's it. Keep going. Keep going. Go.
A new record.
I look for bodies that can stretch. I look for personalities and for people who want to stretch themselves emotionally and physically. You understand? I was pretty crazy. I was diagnosed as manic depressive. And I did some very wild things. I mean, Jesus Christ, I mean, they were really off the wall.
Did anything positive come out of that experience?
It taught me to slow down, certainly, and not to worry so much about everything, not to try to involve myself in everything that goes on. I don't want how much money we lose every year to be a pressure on my back, My mother says to me, she still doesn't understand, you mean you lose? You mean you're losing money?
Finding an apartment in New York, oh boy. It's not easy and it's not fun. If you find one you want, who can afford it? If you find one you can afford, who wants it? Well, did you ever wonder what it would be like if you could rent an apartment and money was no object? How about a studio for $5,000 a month? How about a duplex for $10,000 a month? No, I'm not kidding you. That's what they're getting these days. And what do you get for $5,000 or $6,000? I asked an apartment dweller currently subletting his Manhattan studio. There's an exclusive club in this city. To join it, all you need is a car, a ticket, and a space. Well, I got the car. I got the ticket. All I need is the space.
Ooh, I'm looking for a good time, looking for a good time. I know that it might be
No parking, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. No parking anytime.
Why are you fighting me? Why are you fighting me?
Brother.
Why are you teasing me? Why are you teasing me?
And the most fearful sign of all. Yeah, this little sign strikes fear in the hearts of many, because with it comes... Last year, 80,000 automobiles were eaten by these beasts, and it cost you about $100 to get your car back. It could happen to you. How do you feel about this practice of towing cars?
I think it stinks. The whole place stink.
It stinks.
What would you do to this place if it was in your power to do something to it?
I can't indulge that information on the grounds that may incriminate me.
I feel like blowing up the place.
I like to spit in their face. That's what I like to do.
How did you feel when you saw that guy taking your car away right there?
Lousy. I feel lousy. I feel like killing the guy.
The car's being,
I'm probably one of the most hated and feared men in New York City, you know that. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's just a job.
You remember that little brown Honda last summer? That was mine.
Look, I wasn't here last summer.
Yeah, lucky for you. Not so lucky for me.
What a great way to be welcomed to television, where I thought I'd do that for a year and then go back to theater. And then, of course, I spent another 16 years or so doing television. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And oh, by the way, that was my real hair color. Subscribe if you like the podcast, tell others about it. And once again, thank you so much for joining me on Richard Bey Talk. And as always, all my best. Take care.